opening remarks. My name is Cheryl Markland. I'm the Childhood Ministry Consultant for the Baptist State Convention. This is pretty close to home. I grew up in Locust and served at First Baptist Matthews and at Eastern Hills, went to West Stanley High School and Pfeiffer College. So this is home, and I'm thankful for the chance to be here tonight. Safety and security, let me start over. Some of you guys have handouts. Only of little faith did not run enough. And so when we get through with this presentation, which is what the handout is, just a copy of the PowerPoint, if you would like a copy sent to you, if you will give me your email address, I will be happy to send you a copy of the PowerPoint. Yeah, if you are like two people from the same church, if you don't mind just like taking one copy and sharing. But like I said, I'll be glad to send you a copy of the PowerPoint. That's not a problem at all. You know, we want to think that church is the last safe place on earth, where we don't have to worry about anything, that everybody who comes to church has pure hearts and no evil intent. But the fact is, that's not what church is about. And all you have to do is read the paper. Tony Medlin was sharing that in the Marshall paper, that recently in the last 2 to 3 weeks there have been 2 incidents of pastors who have been charged with or alleged to have perpetrated sexual abuse on youth in his church, their church. And so we want to think that that's not going to happen, but facts are, it may. It could be your church. And so you can't make your church 100% safe all the time, but you can take a lot of steps to put in place some policies and procedures that are going to help protect you, your church, the children, and your reputation in the community. And so those are some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight. Now, why should we even care about safety and security policies and procedures? Statistics say that 1/3 of all girls and 1/6 of all boys will be abused by the age of 18. 93% of those who are abused know their abuser. You know, we want to think it's the stranger hiding behind the tree, but chances are it's a coach or an uncle or a grandparent or a Sunday school teacher is where it happens. 34% are family members, 59% are acquaintances, only 7% are strangers. Now this next statistic, remember this, less than 10% of abuse is reported to police. Over 40% of abusers were juveniles. 14% of that group were under the age of 12. Children are most vulnerable between the ages of 8 to 12. Why do you think that is? Think about the life of an 8 to 12-year-old.
Uneducated. They can't say no, they don't know how to say no.
Yeah, they're
They're
naive.
vulnerable.
They're very trusting.
They're very trusting. But think about it from the perspective of a parent. Once they get to be 8, 10, 9, 10 years old, you begin to release some of the hold on them. You begin to let them wander out of your sight. And that's where it happens. It's what's supposed to happen. It's what's natural. It's what's needed. But at the same point, that's when they're more vulnerable.
Question?
Yeah.
What's the context of this? Is this U.S.? Is this?
Yes. This was compiled and reported by Awana and another organization, Darkness and Light, and I'm assuming this is U.S.
And within a church context or
Just in general,
countrywide?
just
Okay.
general
All right.
population. Now, why should we be concerned about safety and security? First of all, obviously, we want to protect our children. But church is a great place for pedophiles to participate in grooming behaviors. Now, what's a grooming behavior? A grooming behavior is where they test the waters to see if a child is open to them. It may start as something as simple as putting their arm around a child, taking a child for ice cream, putting their hand on a child's knee. It just slowly progresses. They check to see how far that child will let them go. And so it's called grooming. It's that preparing. And this is not a slam on single moms, but often single moms, that these kids are particularly vulnerable because these kids are hungry for a dad, these moms are hungry for a man to be in their life, in their child's life. And so they may make their child, innocently, may make their child available to male influence. You want to protect your leaders. There's a psychological term called transference. And, you know, in a child's mind, somebody can be hurting them, somebody up close, an uncle, a grandparent, a parent, or whatever, but it's just really hard for their mind to understand that somebody who loves them would also hurt them this way. And so what they will do is transfer this blame to somebody farther out in their life circle. It could be a teacher, it could be a preacher, it could be a youth leader. And this person could be totally innocent, but that child is going to blame them for the abuse. And so you want to protect your leaders. And you want to protect your church from adverse media coverage and lawsuits. The last thing on earth you want is for this either to go to court, and lawyers are being trained how to sue churches, and you don't want that media truck in the front yard of your church. Because the allegation may not be true, but that's not what's going to get reported. The allegation is going to be splashed across the news, and your church is almost impossible to overcome that kind of negative publicity. Now, today's parents expect you to have some kind of safety and security system in place. You cannot volunteer in schools, in scouts, in basketball teams, YMCA, without a background check. I mean, that's minimum. It's just not going to happen. As a volunteer, when I served at First Baptist Matthews, this is the craziest thing to me. I can understand the volunteer team that I took into their after-school program having a background check. Do you know I had to have a tetanus shot? Nobody else on my team, but I had to have, no, it wasn't a tetanus shot. I had to be checked for, what's that thing when they stick it on?
Tuberculosis.
Yeah, I had to be checked for that of all things. But there is this sense that parents expect this. And I have heard stories, multiple stories of parents who have gone into a church, into the preschool area to drop their child off, and they did not feel like their child was going to be well taken care of. It was not safe, it was not clean. They turned around and left and never went back to that church. So these parents' first impressions are crucial. I mean, it's hard to think about it, but to be honest, to have a strong safety and security system in place in your church is about kingdom work. Because if you have people come into your church and turn around and leave, that may be the only time they step foot in the church. And so having this kind of system in place is important.
It's also a huge deterrent to someone who might try to take advantage.
Crucial.
When they see that you have a system in the works already, then they say, I'm going to another church as well.
Right.
So
I'm
get
going
rid
somewhere
of
else where the pickings are a little easier.
There you go.
We use a volunteer-based ministry. You know, again, you want to make sure, you want to think everybody has a pure, clean heart, but they don't necessarily. And we're going to talk about some ways to provide some security in this area. A church is viewed as an easy target by predators, just like you said. Now, why do you need it written down? Now, how many of you right now in the back of your mind, do not say it out loud, know one person who thinks the rules are not about them? Everybody knows somebody who thinks that it's not about them. That's why it's so important to have these things written down and approved. Because that way you've got some consistency across the board. Not only that, you've got consistency between Sunday morning, you've got Sunday school, you've got worship care, you may have Awanas, RSGA's choir, and other organizations for children in your church, which are all fine and good. But if everybody has a different set of rules, that's really hard on your volunteers. It's hard on the children. And so that's why it's important to have some kind of consistent expectation. Once you create this written policy, it needs to be voted on either by the governing bodies of your church, either your deacons, your church council, your church at large, whatever elders, whatever you use, whatever system, so that it has some teeth, so it has some authority. And having that written policy is a reminder to remain vigilant in protecting the children. All right, so how do you get started? Does anybody in here have a written policy in place already? That's good. What church are you with? Okay.
First Baptist Wing.
Okay, great. If you don't have this in place, or if you're not sure, you need to check and see. Insurance companies are begging you to do this. I've had somebody call and say, well, we're afraid to let the insurance companies know that we don't have a policy, they'll raise our rates. They will not. They want to help you get this in place. They have resources available to help you. The first thing you want to do is enlist a development team. This isn't something you want to do by yourself because it's going to impact a lot of different groups, a lot of different people. So I would have some Sunday school teachers. I would have, if you have a WANA, maybe you're a WANA commander. Anybody who's going to be impacted, the different groups, I would have representatives. I may consider having a deacon. If you have a lawyer in the church, you may want to have them be part of this. Or you may in time want to have them review your policy. But the people who are going to be impacted by this policy need to have some say in it. But it needs to be somebody who buys into the importance of having that, where they're not going to be a detriment to the process. You want to consider areas of concern for your church. Like I said, you've got all these different ministries, children's ministries. You may want to consider if you have a preschool, how is this going to affect your preschool, weekday preschool, whatever. So consider all the different areas of concern for your church. You know, are you on a main road? That's going to impact what you put. You know, somebody can snatch a child and get out. We want to think we're out in the country, out in the middle of the field, nobody's going to bother us. But that's not necessarily true. You want to put it in writing. You can another option is to have legal review. You want to get that formal approval. But how many of you, how long has it been since you read your church constitution? How many of you know where you could find a copy of the Constitution? Okay, a few folks. If you're not careful, your written policy is going to become like the Constitution, where you know it's out there somewhere. But you want to make sure that this is front and center. So you want to inform and train your parents who are going to be impacted by it. You want to train your leaders. You want to train your deacons, other people who maybe don't even have a dog in the fight in the children's area. But they still need to know that this is available. You may want to train your grandparents if they pick up the children. It's helpful for them to know about it. And once you do that training, I would plan to do it yearly. Because if you don't, it becomes one of those things that it just fades into the background. So it needs to be a priority in what you do. You need to monitor compliance and evaluate and amend as needed. You know, it's not necessarily set in concrete the first time. You may put some system in place and go, after 6 weeks, this is not working. But sometimes knowing what you don't know or knowing what you don't that's not working is as important as knowing what is working. So you can amend it. All right. These are some basic points that you need to consider having in your policy. First one, who can serve? You need to have 2 non-related by marriage persons over the age of 18 in each class or gathering. And why would you have 2 people who are not married to each other in a classroom?
Accountability.
Accountability.
They're not both gone at the same time.
They're both not gone at the same time, but in the event that an incident occurred and you went to court, a husband and wife cannot be compelled to testify against each other. And so that's why if you have a husband and wife in a class, you have a 3rd person, adult, over the age of 18. You can have youth help in your classes, but they cannot be counted in that 2-person rule because they are minors. I would have a 6-month rule minimum for members, 1-year rule for active attenders. A pedophile is not going to wait 6 months to have access to your kids. And not only that, for the benefit of new members who come into your church, they need to get into the body. They need to develop roots. They need to develop community. And if 3 weeks after they get here, you shuttle them off to the children's area and they never go to adult Sunday school or an adult small group, they're not gonna develop roots in your church. But if they go into a class and after a few months, somebody comes to you and says that this person just has some strange ideas, or they just bad vibe, whatever, it's a way to give you a heads up. You know, you trust people for that. And once you have those approved workers, make sure that they're the only ones who have access to the children. All right, beginning and end of the session, this is another important point. You want to have some kind of some procedure for secure drop-off and pickup of children. That can be something as extravagant as an electronic check-in system to something as simple as matching cards. I know the churches that I worked at, there wasn't the money. I mean, there's several $1,000s to put one of these electronic check-in systems in place. But I spent $200 and bought a good quality laminator, based like driver's license size cards, and I just made matching cards. So a parent got a card, a child got a card clipped to them. At the end of the session, the only way you could pick up that child is if you had that card. That way, if grandma came down to get the child, if grandma had the card, I knew she'd talk to whoever dropped them off, and that person had authority to pick up that child. I mean, in today's culture, moms and dads separate. We don't necessarily know